In ancient Egypt, under the whip of slavery, a people groaned. For 4 long centuries, the children of Israel endured Pharaoh's yoke, an unyielding king who hardened his heart against the cries of the oppressed. It was over 400 years of captivity, of tireless labor with no visible hope. A subjugated nation, separated from its promised land, seemed lost in the sands of time and Egyptian oppression. But the God of Israel does not forget his covenant, nor abandon his people in suffering. From the midst of the desert, from the burning bush that was not consumed, the voice of the Most High resounded. And this voice chose a man, Moses, once an Egyptian prince, now a shepherd in Midian. God called him for a monumental task, to be the leader, the divine instrument to liberate his brethren from Pharaoh's tyranny. A mission that seemed impossible in human eyes, to face the most powerful empire of the time, but one that would be accomplished by the power of God. Moses, accompanied by his brother Aaron, the anointed spokesman, headed to the imposing court of the Egyptian king. There, before the man who considered himself almost a god, they presented the command of the true God. The message was clear and resounded with heavenly authority. Let my people go, that they may serve me in the wilderness. It was a simple request, but one that challenged the entire social and economic order of Egypt, built on the enslaved labor of the Hebrews. But Pharaoh's heart was already hardened. He vehemently refused to heed the divine call. Who was the Lord that he, the mighty Pharaoh, should obey his voice and let Israel go? His refusal was not merely political or economic. It was a direct affront to the true God, an act of rebellion that would seal the fate of his empire. The door was shut. Negotiation failed. Pharaoh's arrogant refusal did not end the matter. On the contrary, it set the stage for a series of supernatural and terrible events. His hardness of heart would be the catalyst for God to demonstrate his supremacy, not only over Pharaoh, but over all the false gods of Egypt. The stage was set for the powerful signs and divine judgments that would come in the form of 10 terrifying plagues. Liberation would not come through human diplomacy, but through the strong and mighty hand of God. The confrontation had begun, and Egypt and the world would witness the power of the liberator of Israel. The resistance of the Egyptian heart brought the beginning of divine judgment. The land that once flourished under the Nile saw its waters turn into living blood. The great river, source of life, cradle of Egyptian civilization, wept blood. Upon its banks, not just the Nile, but every stream, every lake, every canal, even the water stored in tanks went inside their very homes, was converted into this terrible scarlet stain. The life that inhabited the aquatic depths perished in agony. The fish, once food and sustenance, floated dead upon the red surface. Nauseating stench hung in the air, a constant reminder of the impurity and death that invaded the heart of Egypt. Drinking from the river water became impossible, a foul and deadly liquid, the first powerful, undeniable manifestation of God's authority over nature and over the gods of Egypt. But Pharaoh, in his hardness, still did not yield. Then came the second wave of celestial power, an invasion that crawled out of the now profaned waters. Frogs. An uncontrollable quantity of frogs emerged from the rivers and lakes, spreading throughout the Egyptian territory. They abandoned their natural refuges and invaded every space of human life. They entered the houses, the palaces, the rooms, the beds. They were everywhere, a repulsive carpet of wet, croaking life that made existence unbearable. The land groaned under the weight of this amphibian plague, an overwhelming proof of divine authority over God's creation. Egypt cried out for relief, but the royal stubbornness persisted, and the dust of the earth, a fundamental element that sustains life, turned against those who trod upon it with arrogance. The third plague arose from the ground at the Lord's command. When Aaron struck the ground with his staff, the dust turned into lice, a tiny but incessant infestation that tormented Egyptians and their animals without distinction, a plague that clung to skin, to hair, causing constant itching and discomfort. Something so basic, the dust, transformed into an irritating pestilence that could not be ignored. This time, not even the Egyptian magicians, with all their art and enchantments, could replicate the phenomenon. Faced with the inability to imitate or to stop this plague from the dust, they uttered words of forced recognition. "This is the finger of God." The direct manifestation of divine power was unmistakable, even for those who served other masters. But the lesson, clear as it was, still needed to be fully grasped. And so the mighty hand stretched forth again, over the land of the Nile. Because of Pharaoh's relentless hard heart, the fourth plague descended with fury. No more blood, no more frogs, not even the incessant gnats that humiliated the magicians. Now, great swarms of voracious flies covered Egypt, a buzzing cloud of torment and affliction. They invaded the homes, the palaces, infested every nook and cranny. It was a visible, inescapable judgment that suffocated daily life and demonstrated the king's refusal to obey the Most High. But note the remarkable difference, the distinction that only the Lord can make. While Egypt groaned under the incessant scourge of these insects in the land of Goshen, where the people of Israel dwelt, there was not a single fly. Not one. It was a clear sign to Pharaoh and to the world. God was making a separation between his people and those who defied him. Yet, Pharaoh's heart remained hardened, a fortress of pride and rebellion. And because of this, the fifth plague was announced, a direct blow against the empire's wealth and livelihood. A severe pestilence struck the livestock of Egypt. The camels, the oxen, the sheep, the horses, all the animals in the fields. In a single terrible day, God destroyed all the Egyptian livestock. Pay attention to the devastating impact of this. The herds were not mere animals. They were the very foundation of Egyptian society at the time. They were the source of raw materials for labor, the backbone of prosperous trade, and an essential source of food and sustenance for the people. To see them all perish in an instant was a crushing blow, an unmistakable demonstration of divine power over the earthly riches and economic strength of a nation. And once again, the distinction manifested unmistakably. While death swept through the Egyptian stables and pastures, none, absolutely none of the animals belonging to the children of Israel were affected, none. They were preserved by the hand of the Lord, further proof that divine justice struck only those who opposed his will and held his people in bondage. Egypt suffered irreparable losses, its possessions, its prosperity being devastated, while Israel, untouched in their properties, awaited the next manifestation of liberating power. And so, once again, Moses and Aaron were sent forth by the supreme will, before that throne of pride, before that hardened heart that dared to defy the Creator himself. Pharaoh, in his unwavering stubbornness, persisted in denying freedom to the chosen people, refusing to allow them to worship the Lord as they had been commanded. Slavery weighed heavily, oppression cried out to the heavens, and the Egyptian king's refusal brought with it the heavy hand of divine judgment. God then, in his all-encompassing power, issued a new command to Moses. It would no longer be a sign in the waters, nor an invasion of creatures, nor a tiny infestation or a plague on the livestock. This time, the judgment would touch their very flesh, their very health, the skin of the oppressors. God instructed Moses to take something common, something from the very ground the Egyptians walked upon and upon which their empire stood. Take for yourself a handful of ashes from the furnace, and the imposing voice seemed to resound. Ashes, remnants of consuming fire, would now be the instrument of an affliction that would consume the flesh. And Moses, with the obedience that marked his mission, raised his hand. In it, a handful of those dry ashes, fine dust, inert by itself. But the power was not in the ashes, but in the divine command that activated them. With a solemn gesture, Moses threw the ashes upwards, to the watching Egyptian sky, to the air that everyone breathed. That fine dust dispersed, carried by the invisible wind, spreading over the land of Egypt, over its cities, over its fields, and then the horror manifested itself. Wherever that fine dust touched, human skin, the fur of animals, a terrible affliction arose. Boils, painful and repulsive sores that formed and burst, covering the skin with festering wounds. A plague that affected health, appearance, physical well-being. Men and women, children and the elderly. No one escaped the touch of those divinely charged ashes. Their bodies became covered in sores. The pain was excruciating, a visible testimony of God's displeasure. Not only the Egyptians, but also their animals suffered the same scourge. The flocks that had survived the previous plague were now afflicted by boils on their skin, making them weak and sick. The cattle, the horses, the sheep, all marked by the judgment that made no distinction between the master and his servant, between the warrior and the laborer, between the king and the peasant. When the matter was Pharaoh's stubbornness. That dust, seemingly harmless, revealed itself to be an agent of torment, an unequivocal demonstration of God's power over life and health, a clear sign to Pharaoh and all Egypt who insisted on not releasing the chosen people. The Nile groaned under the weight of those open sores, and Pharaoh, in his stubborn obstinacy, still resisted the divine will, even after so many overwhelming demonstrations of God's power. Then came the seventh plague, a terrible punishment. From above, God sent a storm of hail and thunder, something never before seen in the entire history of the land of Egypt. The sky opened up in fury, a deafening roar echoed, followed by the merciless fall of gigantic hailstones. They fell with crushing force, destroying everything that was in the fields. From the most tender plant to the sturdy tree, everything was broken and pulverized. The crops, the flax and the barley, which were the basis of their sustenance, were utterly devastated. And the animals that still remained in the fields, those that perhaps had not been brought inside, perished under the relentless hail. It was God's judgment manifested upon the land itself and upon its possessions. But note, even before the storm fell, God had warned. He warned the Egyptians to bring their servants and their flocks to a safe place inside the houses or shelters, a warning of mercy, a chance of escape amidst the punishment. But Pharaoh's stubbornness persisted, and the destruction was complete upon everything that remained exposed to the divine fury. And still, Pharaoh's heart remained hardened. What blindness! He still refused to free God's people from slavery. And because of this unbelievable obstinacy, God sent the eighth plague, an endless army of locusts. God commanded, and a colossal swarm, a living cloud of destruction never before seen, covered the face of the entire land of Egypt. They arrived with a terrifying buzz. There were so many they darkened the sky, blocking out the sunlight. They landed on everything the hail had spared, on all the vegetation that still remained in the country. The trees, the herbs, every leaf, every fruit, every stalk. They devoured everything with relentless voracity. They left the land bare, completely desolate. Absolutely nothing green remained in the entire land of Egypt. It was the final fulfillment of the agricultural destruction, showing God's absolute dominion over creation and his unwavering judgment upon persistent disobedience. What an overwhelming demonstration of power. And then, the ninth plague descended upon the land of Egypt. It was not water, nor animals, nor disease that came now. It was light, such a basic gift, so essential for life, for Egyptian worship, that was brutally taken away. A dense darkness, so profound it could be felt, covered the entire nation. Not for hours, but for 3 long days and 3 long nights, the darkness remained, relentless and total. Imagine the terrified people of Egypt, who were accustomed to the brilliance of the sun, suddenly plunged into this absolute blackness. It wasn't merely the absence of light, it was an oppressive gloom, a force that prevented any movement. Egypt, once a land of magnificent temples and incessant activity, now paralyzed by this shroud of impenetrable blackness. No one could see their hand before their face. No one could rise up or leave their place. Activities ceased completely. Commerce collapsed. Daily life itself was suffocated, stopped in time by this endless night. What a terrifying judgment descended upon a land that exalted itself in its own sun gods, in its own cults of light. God Most High showed his supreme power over the sun itself, over the very light that these false gods supposedly controlled. And in the midst of this suffocating darkness, a miracle, a contrast that screamed out the name of God. In the homes of the people of Israel, there in the land of Goshen, the light shone with unshakable clarity. Yes, where the children of God dwelt, there was full clarity. There was no darkness there, only the divine light that clearly separated the people of God from the punishment falling with deadly weight upon Egypt. This plague was not just a physical or economic punishment. It was a direct attack on the heart of Egyptian pride, an irrefutable challenge to their worship of light and the sun, and an undeniable demonstration of the distinction God made between those who served him faithfully and those who persisted in defying him and enslaving his people. The relentless stubbornness and continued disobedience of Pharaoh and all his people brought this total darkness upon them, a somber symbol of the spiritual darkness in their hearts. A chilling reminder of what happens when one rejects the voice, the authority, the mercy of the Most High. 3 days of complete paralysis, a forced silence, a forced meditation in darkness, a terrifying prelude to the final blow that was to come. The mighty hand of God was weighing down with all his power upon Egypt, and even light itself obeyed his sovereign command. What an astonishing scene of divine power! What a clear and undeniable separation between God's chosen ones and those who, in their hardness, persisted in resisting his call to liberation. This final plague would be the most terrible, a judgment never before seen. It struck the heart of Egyptian families. God's hand was about to fall, not on possessions, nor only on the land, but on life itself. Every firstborn son throughout the vast land of Egypt, from the heir on the throne to the son of the humblest servant, even the firstborn of their animals, all were marked for judgment. But the Lord, in his perfect justice and mercy, provided a way for his people. For the children of Israel, there was hope. There was a path to deliverance. God gave specific instructions, life-saving ones. Every family was to take a lamb without defect, perfect. This innocent life would be a substitute, a sacrifice. They were to kill the lamb and take its precious blood. This blood was not to be hidden. No, it was to be applied visibly, boldly, on the doorposts and the lintel of their houses. This mark, this sign of the blood, was crucial. For when the destroyer passed through the land of Egypt that night, seeing the blood, he would pass over that house. The firstborn inside would be spared. Life would be preserved. Imagine the terror that fell upon Egypt that night. A great cry went up. In every Egyptian home, there was death. The lament of mourning echoed from the palace walls to the humblest dwellings. The king's son struck dead, the servant's son taken, the firstborn of their livestock dead. But in the houses of Israel, silence, life, protection. The blood had done its work. This devastating blow, this final demonstration of God's supreme power and judgment, finally broke Pharaoh's hardened will. His resistance crumbled. He could no longer withstand the force of the Almighty. The hour of Israel's freedom had arrived. The blood of the Lamb opened the way out of slavery, and this event, this miraculous deliverance, carries deep meaning. It is more than just a historical escape, it is a shadow, a powerful picture. The sacrificed lamb, its blood providing salvation. It points to the ultimate sacrifice, to Jesus Christ, the Lamb of God. He came to die in our place. His perfect blood shed on the cross is the sign for salvation. He offers deliverance, not only from physical death, but from the worst plague imaginable, the eternal death that awaits all who are separated from God. The question echoes through the ages. Will you accept this great salvation? Will you trust in the blood of the true Lamb? It is a decision of eternal consequence, following the dense darkness that covered the land for 3 long days, a sign of supreme power over light itself. God's final judgment manifested in an overwhelming way. On that dreadful night, a bitter wail echoed throughout all of Egypt. From Pharaoh's palace to the humblest hovel, Death visited every Egyptian home, reaping the lives of all the firstborn, both of men and animals. Neither the children of nobles nor the first offspring of servants or even the remaining livestock were spared. It was a crushing blow, an unbearable pain that finally broke the resistance of that proud nation. Meanwhile, in Goshen, where the people of Israel lived, there was peace and deliverance. As the Lord had instructed, each Hebrew family had sacrificed a spotless lamb and applied the blood to their doorposts and lintels. That red mark was the sign for the angel of death. Upon seeing the blood, the destruction passed over those houses, sparing the Israelite firstborn. It was an unquestionable demonstration of the distinction God makes between those who belong to Him and the world that refuses to obey. Terrified by the devastation, and finally humbled before the power of the God of Israel, Pharaoh yielded. The dead of night, he sent for Moses and Aaron and gave them the irrevocable command, "Leave! Get out of here, you and all the children of Israel. Take your flocks, your possessions, everything. Go serve your God as you requested." And so, after more than 400 years of brutal captivity, the people of God marched toward freedom, driven by divine power and the breaking of Pharaoh's will. That event, the passing over of the angel of death over the houses marked by the blood of the Lamb, gave rise to the celebration of Passover. The passing over, the Passover, became the living memory of Israel's deliverance from Egyptian hands. But the meaning of Passover transcends ancient history. That sacrificed lamb pointed to a greater sacrifice. It pointed to Jesus Christ, the Lamb of God, who was to come to take away the sin of the world. Just as the blood of the literal lamb protected the firstborn of Israel from physical death, the blood of Jesus offers deliverance from the worst of all plagues, eternal death, separation from God. Judgment came upon Egypt, but salvation was offered to Israel through the blood. Today, death and condemnation hang over all humanity because of sin. But God, in His infinite love, provided a substitute lamb. Jesus died in our place, and His blood shed on the cross is the mark that protects us from divine judgment. The decision whether or not to accept this deliverance, to allow Christ's blood to spiritually cover our lives, is the most important choice each one of us can make. May we understand the depth of this sacrifice and the magnitude of the salvation offered. And so, we reach the end of another journey through the sacred scriptures. If this message has touched your heart and enlightened your understanding, we ask that you leave your like, your comment, and, above all, that you subscribe to support our project of carrying the word forward. May the peace of the Lord be with you, and may God richly bless your life.